Dr. Nari rubbed her tired eyes and stared at the computer screen again. She had been working for 12 hours straight in the communications lab of the research ship Harmony's Edge. The ship was floating in deep space, far from any planets or stars. Her job was to listen for signals from other worlds and other species. Most days, she heard nothing but empty space. Sometimes she picked up old radio waves from Earth or signals from other human colonies. But today was different. A weak signal came through the speakers, so faint she almost missed it. The signal was strange. It did not sound like anything in the computer files. Nari turned up the volume and listened carefully. The sounds were musical, like singing, but filled with fear and sadness. She had never heard anything like it before. "Computer, record this signal and run analysis," she said. The computer beeped. "Signal recorded. Unknown language pattern detected. Attempting translation." Nari leaned forward in her chair. After 20 years of studying alien languages, she could tell when something was important. This signal was not random noise from space. Someone was trying to talk to them. Captain Hyan walked into the lab carrying a cup of coffee. He was a tall man with kind eyes who had been running science missions for 15 years. "Still working, Nari? You should get some sleep." "Captain, you need to hear this," Nari said. She played the signal again. Hyun set down his coffee and listened. Even though he could not understand the words, he could hear the emotion in the sounds. "That sounds like a distress call." "I think so too. But look at this." Nari pointed to her screen. "The signal is coming from outside the known galaxy maps, way out past the safe zones where ships are supposed to go." The computer made a soft chime. "Translation progress, 15% complete. Detected words include help, dying, and ancient evil." Hyun and Nari looked at each other. In all their years exploring space, they had never received a real alien distress call. The galaxy had many different species, but they all lived in their own areas and rarely asked others for help. "How long until full translation?" Hyun asked. "At least 6 hours, Captain. This language is completely new to our systems." Hyun picked up his communication device. "This is Captain Hyun to all senior staff. Emergency meeting in Conference Room 1 in 30 minutes. An hour later, the ship's top officers sat around a metal table. Besides Hyun and Nari, there was Commander Lee, the ship's second-in-command, Dr. Park, the chief scientist, and Lieutenant Cho, the communications officer. Nari played the alien signal for everyone. The room fell silent as the sad, musical sounds filled the air. "Preliminary translation shows they are asking for help," Nari explained. "They mentioned something called the Devourers that is destroying their worlds. But here is the strange part. They specifically ask for help from the Deathworld species." "Deathworld species?" Commander Lee asked. Dr. Park leaned forward. "That is what some aliens call humans. They think Earth is too dangerous for normal life because of our weather, animals, and natural disasters. To them, we are the crazy species that lives on a deadly planet." "The signal came with coordinates," Nari continued. "They want us to come to their star system. It is very far away past the edges of known space." Lieutenant Cho studied the data on his tablet. "Captain, this could be dangerous. We do not know anything about this species or what kind of trouble they are in." Hyun was quiet for a long time. He had spent his career exploring space peacefully, studying new worlds and meeting new species. But something about this signal felt different. The fear in those alien voices was real. Continue working on the translation, he finally said. I need to contact Earth Command. 3 hours later, the translation was complete. Nari read the full message to the senior staff. People of the Death World called Earth, we are the Villani. We have watched your species for many cycles and learned your language from your transmissions. We know you are warriors who fight when others cannot. An ancient evil has awakened in our space. The Devourers have returned after 10,000 years of sleep. They consume everything. Our worlds, our people, our memories. We have no weapons to fight them. Our peaceful nature cannot stop what is coming. You are our only hope. The coordinates follow this message. Please, if you receive this, remember that billions of lives depend on your answer. The room was completely silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Somewhere in the darkness of space, an entire species was dying, and they had called for help from the one species known for fighting impossible battles. Send this to Earth Command immediately, Hyun ordered. Mark it as Priority Alpha. 2 days later, the answer came back from Earth. The message was short and direct. Galactic Council emergency session called. Report to Station Omega immediately. Station. Omega was the largest space station in human territory. It floated between Earth and Mars and served as the meeting place for the Galactic Council. Representatives from 12 different species came there to discuss important matters. When the Harmony's Edge arrived at the station, Hyun could see ships from all over the galaxy. The Zephyrians had sent their crystal ships that looked like floating diamonds. The Rocklings came in their heavy metal vessels built like flying mountains. Even the mysterious Veil Walkers had sent a ship, though it was hard to see because it bent light around itself. Ambassador Tay met Hyun at the docking bay. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who had spent 20 years speaking for humanity in galactic politics. This Villani message has the whole council worried, she said as they walked through the station corridors. Most species have never heard of the Devourers, but the oldest races remember stories about them. What kind of stories? Hyun asked. The kind that keep children awake at night. Ancient legends about star-eaters that sleep between the galaxies and wake up hungry. They entered the council chamber, a huge round room with seats for all the different species. The air felt heavy with worry. Representatives whispered to each other in dozens of different languages. The council speaker, a tall blue alien called Zentar, called for order. We gather to discuss the Villani distress signal. The message asks for military intervention in unknown space against an enemy we do not understand. One by one, the representatives spoke. Most said it was too dangerous. The Zephyrians said they could not risk their people for strangers. The Rocklings said their ships were not built for long journeys into unknown space. Finally, it was Ambassador Tay's turn to speak. She stood up slowly and looked around the room. The Villani called us for a reason, she said. They have been watching us. They know what humans can do. When other species see a problem too big to solve, they run away. When humans see a problem too big to solve, we find a way to solve it anyway. The room buzzed with nervous conversation. Everyone knew about human military power, but most hoped they would never need to see it used. The Galactic Council votes, announced Speaker Zentar. All in favor of sending a military mission to help the Villani? One by one, the votes came in. Most species voted no. But the final count was closer than expected. The mission was approved by just 3 votes. The mission will be led by Earth forces, Speaker Zentar declared. May the stars protect them. As the council session ended, Ambassador Tay knew what would happen next. Earth Command would send their most powerful military force, the Death Fleet, and Admiral Wu would lead them into the unknown to fight an enemy that might be worse than anything humanity had ever faced. The Villani distress call had been answered. The Deathworlders were coming. Admiral Wu stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Iron Typhoon, and watched the stars through the huge front window. The ship was massive, bigger than most space stations, with thick armor and enough weapons to destroy a small moon. But even this giant ship was just one part of humanity's most feared military force. The communication officer turned around in his chair. "Admiral, we are receiving deployment orders from Earth Command." "Put it on the main screen," Wu said. The window changed to show Fleet Commander Hayes, a stern woman with gray hair who ran all of Earth's military forces. Her face was serious as she spoke. "Admiral Wu, the Galactic Council has approved the Villani rescue mission. You will take the Death Fleet into unknown space to fight an enemy we know almost nothing about. This may be the most dangerous mission in human history." Wu nodded. He had expected this order ever since the alien distress signal was translated. The Death Fleet was created for impossible missions like this one. "What is our timeline, Commander?" he asked. "You leave in 72 hours. Intelligence reports will be transmitted to your ship within the hour. Good luck, Admiral. Bring our people home." The screen went dark. Wu turned to his bridge crew, men and women who had served with him for years through dozens of dangerous missions. "Signal all ships. Captain's meeting in 2 hours." The Death Fleet was made up of 12 ships, each one designed for a different kind of warfare. Unlike other species who built their ships for defense or exploration, humans built ships to win fights in the darkest corners of space. 2 hours later, the captains gathered in the Iron Typhoon's main conference room. Wu looked around the table, at the men and women who commanded the deadliest ships in the galaxy. Commander Hana sat to his right. She was his tactical officer and the smartest military mind he had ever worked with. Her job was to figure out how to win battles that seemed impossible to win. Captain Jin commanded the stealth destroyer Shadow's Bite. He was a quiet man who never smiled, but his ship could appear and disappear like a ghost. Enemy fleets often died without ever seeing what killed them. Captain Day ran the assault carrier Bone Crusher. He was built like a mountain and had the loudest laugh in the fleet. His ship carried 5,000 Marines who could capture any target, no matter how well defended. Captain Saul was the youngest person at the table. She commanded the experimental weapon platform Void Render, a ship so new that even the other human captains did not know what all its weapons could do. "Captains," Wu began, "we have received our mission orders. We are going to rescue an alien species called the Villani from an enemy called the Devourers." He pressed a button, and the table's surface became a computer screen showing star maps. "The enemy is here, in this star system, 40 days' travel from Earth. We know almost nothing about them except that they destroy entire worlds." Captain Day leaned forward. "How many ships do they have?" "Unknown." "How advanced are their weapons?" "Unknown." "How do they fight?" "Unknown." Wu's voice was calm, but everyone could hear the concern. "What we do know is that the Villani are peaceful people with no military. They have been watching humanity for years and decided we are their only hope." Commander Hana studied the star charts. "Admiral, this mission profile is unlike anything we have done before. We are going into unknown space to fight an unknown enemy with unknown capabilities." "That is correct, Commander, which is why we are taking the entire Death Fleet instead of a smaller force." Captain Saul spoke up. What do we know about the Volani themselves? Are they asking us to save their people or help them fight? Dr. Kang will brief us on what intelligence we have, Wu said. Dr. Kang was the fleet's chief scientist. She was an expert on alien biology and had studied every known species in the galaxy. She walked to the front of the room and activated a holographic display. The Volani have been sending radio signals into space for about 200 years, she explained. From what we can tell, they are a peaceful species with advanced technology. They have never fought a war and have no concept of military strategy. The hologram showed images taken from Volani transmissions. The aliens were small and graceful, with skin that changed colors like oil on water. Their cities were beautiful, with tall spires that looked like they were grown rather than built. They seemed to be herbivores with no natural predators on their homeworld, Dr. Kang continued. This means they evolved without any fighting instincts. When they call us Deathworlders, they mean it literally. To them, Earth is a nightmare. Planet where creatures fight and kill each other for survival, Captain Jin spoke for the first time. And the Devourers? Dr. Kang's expression became dark. We found references to them in the oldest alien databases. Most species think they are myths, but the records suggest they are real. Ancient texts describe them as star-eaters that sleep for thousands of years between feeding cycles. Feeding. Cycles? Captain Day asked. They consume entire solar systems. Not just the planets and stars, but somehow they absorb the knowledge and memories of every living thing they destroy. Each time they feed, they become stronger and smarter. The room fell silent. Every captain around the table had fought in dozens of battles, but this was different. They were used to fighting enemies they could understand, other ships, space pirates, rebellious colonies. The Devourers sounded like something from a nightmare. Commander Hana broke the silence. If they absorb memories and knowledge, they will learn our tactics as we fight them. That is our biggest challenge, Wu agreed. Traditional military strategy may not work against an enemy that can learn and adapt instantly. Over the next hour, they discussed the mission details. The Death Fleet would travel to the Volani system as quickly as possible. Half the ships would focus on evacuation and defense, while the other half would engage the Devourers directly. Remember, Wu told his captains, the Volani chose to call us for help. Every other species in the galaxy thinks this mission is too dangerous, but they looked at humanity and saw something different. They saw warriors who fight when everyone else runs away. Captain Saul raised her hand. Admiral, what if we cannot win? What if the Devourers are too powerful? Wu was quiet for a moment. Then we make sure the Volani escape, even if it costs us everything. That is what it means to be human. We do not abandon people who ask for our help. The meeting ended and the captains returned to their ships. Across the Death Fleet, preparations began immediately. Marines checked their weapons and armor. Engineers tested the engines and weapons systems. Medical teams prepared for casualties. On the Shadow's Bite, Captain Jin gathered his stealth specialists. These were men and women who could slip through. Enemy defenses like smoke through a screen door. Their job would be reconnaissance and surprise attacks. Aboard the Bone Crusher, Captain Day spoke to his Marines. They were the toughest fighters in human space, trained to capture enemy ships and installations. They specialized in fighting in zero-gravity and hostile environments. Captain Saul worked with her weapons specialists on the Void Render. Her ship carried experimental weapons that could tear holes in space itself. The technology was so new that they were still learning what it could do. Throughout the fleet, Similar preparations were taking place. This was what humans did best: prepare for impossible fights and find ways to win them anyway. Dr. Kang spent her time studying every piece of information about the Devourers. The ancient records were frustrating because they read more like mythology than military intelligence. But between the legends and stories, she began to piece together a picture of what they might face. The Devourers were described as beings of living shadow that could change their shape at will. They did not use ships, in the traditional sense, but instead grew their vessels from consumed matter. Most terrifying of all, they could absorb the consciousness of their victims, making them effectively immortal. Commander Hana worked on tactical scenarios, trying to imagine how to fight an enemy that could learn from every battle. Traditional. Human advantages like surprise, aggression, and superior technology might not work against creatures that could adapt instantly. As the 72-hour deadline approached, families came to say goodbye to their loved ones. The Death Fleet was humanity's finest military force, but everyone knew this mission was different. Some of these ships might not come home. Admiral Wu stood on his bridge and watched the final preparations. In a few hours, they would jump to hyperspace and begin the long journey to the Villani system. They were about to face an enemy that had destroyed civilizations for millions of years. But as he looked at his fleet, Wu felt something that had always made humans dangerous: confidence in the face of impossible odds. Other species might be smarter or more advanced, but none of them had the human ability to find hope in hopeless situations. The Devourers were about to learn why the galaxy feared the Deathworlders. The Death Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Villani system, and what they saw made even the experienced officers gasp in horror. Where there should have been 5 beautiful worlds orbiting a yellow star, only 2 planets remained, intact. The other 3 were nothing but dead rocks floating in space. Admiral Wu stood on the bridge of the Iron Typhoon and watched the destruction on the main screen. The dead planets looked like someone had used a giant spoon to scoop away everything living from their surfaces. What remained behind were deep scars in the ground and strange, twisted structures that pulsed with sick light. "Admiral," the sensor operator called out, "I am detecting massive organic structures on the consumed planets. They appear to be growing." "Growing into what?" Commander Hana asked. "Unknown, ma'am, but they are definitely alive and expanding." Captain Hyun, who had followed the fleet to serve as diplomatic liaison, studied the readings on his screen. "Admiral, we are receiving a signal from the second planet. It is Villani." "Put it through," Wu ordered. The main screen changed to show the inside of what looked like an underground shelter. A group of small, graceful aliens with skin that shimmered like oil on water stood around a communication device. Their large eyes were filled with fear and desperate hope. The alien in front spoke in musical tones, and the computer translated his words. "Human ships, I am Thessarian Prime Yule, leader of the surviving Villani. We thank the stars that you received. Our message: we have so little time left." "This is Admiral Wu of the Earth Death Fleet," Wu replied. "We came as soon as we could. What is your situation?" 3 of our worlds are gone. The Devourers came 6 days ago and consumed everything on those planets in hours. We estimate we have perhaps 2 days before they finish growing their harvest structures and move to our remaining worlds. Captain Hyun leaned forward. "Growing structures? What do you mean?" Prime Yule's skin colors shifted to darker shades, which the translation system indicated was a sign of great distress. The Devourers do not simply kill and move on. They transform consumed worlds into breeding and growing grounds. Each planet they take makes them stronger for the next attack. Admiral Wu felt a chill run down his spine. How many Devourers are we facing? We do not know. They appear to be a collective consciousness rather than individual beings. What you might call a hive mind, but far more ancient and terrible than anything in our records. The communication was interrupted by alarms blaring throughout the Villani shelter. Prime Yule looked at someone off-screen, then turned back with even more fear in his large eyes. "Admiral, our sensors show movement on the consumed worlds. Something is launching from the surface." On the Iron Typhoon, the sensor operator confirmed the report. "Admiral, multiple objects rising from all 3 dead planets. They are heading straight for us." "Battle stations," Wu ordered. Throughout the Death Fleet, crews rushed to their positions as the ships prepared for combat. The objects rising from the consumed worlds looked like nothing any human had ever seen. They were not built. They were grown. Dark, twisted shapes that moved through space like living creatures, pulsing with the same sick light as the structures on the dead planets. "Count and classification?" Commander Hana asked. 37 contacts, various sizes. The largest is approximately the size of our heavy cruisers. They appear to be biological rather than mechanical. Captain Hyun opened a channel to the Villani. "Prime Yule, we need to get your people off those planets immediately. Can you reach orbital evacuation points? Our ships are not built for combat or rapid evacuation. We have perhaps 50 vessels that could carry a few thousand people each, but we have over 2 million survivors on each world." Admiral Wu made a quick decision. "Captain Day, take the Bone Crusher and 3 escort ships to begin evacuation. Operations. Captain Jin, take your stealth ships and get me detailed reconnaissance on those biological ships. Everyone else, prepare for engagement." The Devourer bioships moved unlike anything in human experience. Instead of following predictable orbital mechanics, they seemed to flow through space like sharks swimming through water. Their formation had no recognizable pattern, but somehow it felt coordinated and purposeful. Captain Jin's stealth destroyer, Shadow's Bite, slipped silently toward the enemy formation. His ship was coated with advanced materials that made it nearly invisible to most sensors, and his crew were experts at gathering intelligence without being detected. "Admiral," Jin's voice came through the communication system, "these things are not ships in any sense we understand. They appear to be living creatures, possibly grown rather than built. I am detecting massive internal organs, neural networks, and what might be weapon systems integrated into their biology." "Any weaknesses?" Commander Hana asked. "Difficult to determine. Their outer shells appear heavily armored, but the armor is living tissue rather than metal. They might be vulnerable to different types of weapons than we normally use. The first contact came when the leading Devourer bioship fired at the human fleet. Instead of energy beams or missiles, it launched what looked like living spears made of the same dark material as the ships themselves. The projectiles moved with intelligent purpose, changing direction to track their targets. "Evasive maneuvers," Wu ordered. "Return fire with conventional weapons." The human ships opened fire with plasma cannons and missile batteries. The weapons struck the bioships and caused visible damage, but the creatures immediately began healing themselves. Within minutes, holes in their armor sealed shut and damaged areas regrew. "They are adapting to our weapons," the tactical officer reported. "Each hit does less damage than the one before." This was exactly what Admiral Wu had feared. The Devourers could learn from every attack and develop defenses in real time. Traditional human tactics of overwhelming firepower would not work against an enemy that could adapt faster than they could inflict damage. "Captain Saul," Wu called to the experimental weapons platform, "this is why we brought you. Show us what the Void Render can do." Captain Saul's ship was unlike anything else in the human fleet. It was built around experimental weapons that manipulated space itself rather than simply firing projectiles or energy beams. The technology was so advanced that most of the crew did not fully understand how it worked. "Firing spatial distortion cannon," Saul reported. An invisible wave of twisted space struck the nearest bioship. Instead of healing like it had from conventional weapons, the creature began to tear itself apart as the space around it folded in impossible directions. Within seconds, the bioship collapsed into a point of dark light and disappeared. "Direct hit and target destroyed," the sensor operator called out with amazement. "Whatever that weapon does, they cannot adapt to it." But the victory was short-lived. The other bioships immediately changed their tactics, spreading out and approaching from multiple directions at once. Worse, new shapes were rising from the consumed planets, larger creatures that dwarfed even the biggest human ships. Lieutenant Commander Bo led a reconnaissance team from the Shadow's Bite to get a closer look at one of the dead worlds. What they found was beyond anything in their worst nightmares. The planet's surface had been completely transformed. Instead of cities and forests, the ground was covered with massive organic structures that looked like a cross between a computer and a living organism. Tubes and cables made of flesh connected different sections, carrying flowing substances that glowed with unnatural colors. "Admiral," Bo reported from his small scout ship, "the entire planet has been converted into some kind of biological computer. I am detecting massive amounts of electrical activity, like a brain the size of a world." "What is it computing?" Dr. Kang asked from the Iron Typhoon. "Unknown, but the energy patterns suggest it is processing enormous amounts of information, maybe memories and knowledge from the beings they consumed." As Bo's team watched, they saw something that made their blood run cold. The structures on the planet began shifting and reorganizing themselves. New shapes began to grow from the surface, shapes that looked disturbingly similar to Villani architecture. They are not just consuming the planets, Bo realized. They are learning to recreate what they destroyed. They are making copies. The battle in space continued as more bioships arrived from the consumed worlds. The human fleet found themselves fighting creatures that could heal from damage, adapt to new weapons, and coordinate their attacks with perfect precision. But the humans had advantages too. Captain Jin's stealth ships struck from unexpected angles, hitting the bioships before they could react. Captain Saul's experimental weapons continued to destroy targets that could not adapt to attacks that bent the laws of physics. Most importantly, the humans fought with an unpredictability that seemed to confuse the Devourers. Where most species had logical, efficient military tactics, humans combined careful planning with sudden bursts of creative chaos. "Admiral," Commander Hana said as she studied the battle data, "I think I understand what is happening. The Devourers learn by absorbing the memories and tactics of the species they consume, but they have never consumed a species like us." "What do you mean?" "Every other species fights to minimize casualties and preserve resources. They use logic and efficiency. But humans fight to win, even if it means doing things that seem crazy or suicidal." The battle had been raging for 6 hours, and Admiral Wu could see they were losing. For every Devourer bioship the Death Fleet destroyed, 2 more rose from the consumed planets. Worse, the creatures were learning from each engagement, becoming harder to kill with every passing hour. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "Captain Day reports successful boarding of the largest bioship. His Marines are fighting inside the creature itself." On the main screen, they could watch the bone crusher embedded deep inside the massive biological enemy. The assault carrier's hull was partly dissolved by the creature's acidic fluids, but somehow the ship was still fighting from within. "What is Day finding in there?" Commander Hana asked. Captain Day's voice crackled through the communication system. His breathing was heavy, and they could hear the sounds of fighting in the background. "Admiral, this thing is not just a ship. It is like a floating city. We are fighting through chambers filled with—" I do not know how to describe it. "Living, computers made of flesh and bone." "Are there crew members, pilots?" Wu asked. "No, sir. The entire creature is the crew. It thinks with 1,000 different brains connected together. My Marines are trying to reach what looks like a central nervous system." Dr. Kang studied the biological readings from Day's team. "Admiral, if Captain Day can disrupt the central nervous system, it might sever this creature's connection to the Devourer collective." "Do it," Wu ordered. Meanwhile, Captain Saul's experimental weapon platform continued to score kills against the bioships. Her spatial distortion cannons were the only weapons that could destroy the creatures faster than they could heal. But the Void Render was running low on the exotic materials needed to power those weapons. "Admiral," Saul reported, "I have maybe 6 more shots before my spatial cannons are depleted. After that, I will have to rely on conventional weapons like everyone else." Captain Jin's stealth destroyers were having more success. By striking from unexpected angles and using hit-and-run tactics, they could damage the bioships before the creatures could adapt. But even his ships were taking damage from the Devourer's living projectiles. "Admiral," Jin's voice was calm despite the chaos around his ship, "I am seeing something troubling. The bioships are not just adapting to our weapons. They are starting to copy our tactics." Wu felt his blood run cold. "What do you mean?" 3 of the smaller bioships just attempted a flanking maneuver identical to one we used an hour ago. They are learning our strategy as well as our technology. This was the nightmare scenario Commander Hana had predicted. The Devourers were not just healing from damage. They were absorbing human military knowledge with every engagement. Dr. Kang made a discovery that changed everything. "Admiral, I have been analyzing the brain patterns from the bioships. The Devourers are not just one species. They are hundreds of different species all merged together into a collective consciousness." "Explain," Wu demanded. "Every species they have consumed over millions of years is still alive inside their collective mind. They have access to the memories, knowledge, and abilities of every civilization they have ever destroyed. That is why they can adapt so quickly. They have millions of years of combined experience to draw from." Commander Hana looked up from her tactical display with horror. "If they consume humanity, they will gain access to all our military knowledge. Every tactic, every weapon design, every strategic innovation we have ever developed. Not just our military knowledge," Dr. Kang added grimly. "Our entire civilization, our science, our culture, our way of thinking. They would become us, but with the power of every other species they have absorbed." The magnitude of the threat hit everyone on the bridge. This was not just about saving the Villani. If the Devourers consumed humanity, they would become unstoppable. They would have human aggression and creativity combined with the accumulated knowledge of millions of other species. We cannot let them take even one human ship, Wu said quietly. At that moment, Captain Day's team reached the central nervous system of the bioship they had boarded. What they found was both fascinating and terrifying. A massive brain made up of neural tissue from dozens of different species, all connected together in a complex web. "Admiral," Day reported, "I am looking at brain matter from species I do not recognize. Some of this looks ancient, really ancient. I think some of these neural patterns might be millions of years old." "Can you disrupt it?" Hana asked. "My demolitions expert thinks so. But Admiral, when we destroy this brain, we might be killing the last remnants of species that have been extinct for eons." Wu did not hesitate. "Do it. Those species chose extinction over absorption. Honor their sacrifice." The explosion inside the bioship's central nervous system had an immediate effect. The massive creature began convulsing and writhing in space. Its connection to the Devourer Collective was severed, and it began attacking other bioships randomly. But the victory came at a cost. The other Devourers immediately recognized what had happened and began changing their tactics. Instead of sending their bioships to engage the human fleet directly, they began pulling back toward the consumed planets. "They are retreating," the sensor operator reported. "No," Dr. Kang said, studying the data. "They are regrouping. Look at the energy readings from the planet surfaces. The biological computers covering the consumed worlds were lighting up with massive amounts of activity. The structures began reshaping themselves, growing new forms that looked more aggressive and threatening. They are using the planetary computers to design new bioships," Dr. Kang realized. "Ships specifically designed to counter our tactics and weapons." Prime Yule's voice came through the communication system from the Villani shelter. "Admiral Wu, our sensors show massive changes on the consumed worlds. The growth rate has increased by 300%. Whatever you did to anger them, they are preparing something terrible." Captain Hyun was coordinating the evacuation efforts with the surviving Villani. "Admiral, we have evacuated about 200,000 Villani so far, but there are still over 3 million people on the 2 remaining planets. At our current rate, we need at least 2 more days." "We do not have 2 days," Wu replied, watching the energy readings from the consumed worlds continue to climb. Commander Hana was working frantically on new tactical scenarios. "Admiral, traditional evacuation will not work. We need a different approach." "What do you suggest?" "We use the Chaos Protocol." Every senior officer on the bridge turned to look at her. The Chaos Protocol was a theoretical military strategy that had never been tested in real combat. It involved deliberately creating unpredictable, seemingly irrational situations that would confuse enemies who relied on logical analysis. "Explain the protocol," Wu ordered. "Instead of fighting a defensive battle while we evacuate, we launch simultaneous attacks on all 3 consumed planets. We create so much chaos and unpredictability that the Devourers cannot process what we are doing fast enough to counter it." "That sounds like suicide," Dr. Kang said. "It is suicide," Hana agreed. "For a normal species, but humans specialize in doing things that should be impossible. We attack when we should defend. We charge when we should retreat. We sacrifice ourselves to save others, even when it makes no logical sense." Admiral Wu studied the tactical display. The plan was insane, but Commander Hana was right about one thing. It was uniquely human. No other species would even consider such a strategy. "The Devourers have spent millions of years absorbing logical, efficient civilizations," Hana continued. They have never encountered a species that deliberately chooses chaos over order, sacrifice over self-preservation. Captain Saul's voice came through the communication system. Admiral, I volunteer to lead the assault on the central consumed planet. My experimental weapons might be able to disrupt their planetary brain. That is a one-way mission, Captain, Wu warned. I understand, sir, but if we can damage their central processing, it might give us the time we need to evacuate the Villani. Captain, Jin also volunteered. My stealth ships can infiltrate the other two planets simultaneously. If we coordinate our attacks, we can hit all three planetary brains at the same time. Captain Day, still fighting inside the captured bioship, added his voice to the plan. Admiral, I can use this bioship as a weapon. If we can guide it into one of the planetary structures, the explosion might take out an entire section of their computer network. Dr. Kang looked at the readings from her instruments. Admiral, this plan has a very low probability of success. What is the probability that we can win a conventional battle? Wu asked. Dr. Kang was quiet for a moment. Near 0%, sir. Then, we try the impossible. All ships prepare for the Chaos Protocol. We are going to show the Devourers why the galaxy fears the Deathworlders. As the Death Fleet prepared for what might be their final battle, the Devourer planetary computers continued their work. New bioships were growing on the surface, larger and more dangerous than anything they had faced before. But the computers were also trying to solve a problem they had never encountered: how to predict and counter the actions of a species that deliberately chose irrationality over logic. For the first time in millions of years, the ancient collective consciousness of the Devourers was experiencing something new: uncertainty. The Chaos Protocol began with Captain Jin's stealth ships disappearing into the darkness. The Shadow's Bite and her sister ships used their invisibility systems to slip past the new bioships rising from the consumed planets. Their mission was to infiltrate the planetary brain networks and plant disruption charges deep inside the biological computers. Admiral Wu watched from the bridge of the Iron Typhoon as his fleet split into 3 groups. It went against every military principle he had learned in 30 years of service. Dividing your forces in the face of a superior enemy was supposed to be suicide. But Commander Hana was right. The Devourers expected logical tactics. All ships, Wu announced over the fleet communication system. Remember that we are not trying to win a conventional battle. We are trying to create so much chaos that the enemy cannot process what we are doing. Fight like humans. Fight like Deathworlders. Captain. Saul led the first assault group toward the largest consumed planet. Her experimental weapon platform, Void Render, was accompanied by 2 heavy cruisers and a squadron of fighters. Their job was to punch through the bioship defenses and deliver a spatial distortion warhead directly into the planet's central nervous system. Admiral, Sol reported, approaching the first defensive line. Bioships are moving to intercept, but their formation looks confused. The Devourers had built their defenses expecting a logical attack pattern. Instead, Sol's ships were flying in seemingly random directions, changing course every few seconds, and firing their weapons at targets that made no tactical sense. They are trying to predict our movements, Sol's tactical officer reported, but our flight pattern has no pattern for them to analyze. Captain Day had managed to gain control of the captured bioship from the inside. His Marines had fought through the creature's internal defenses and reached its primitive control centers. Now, the massive bioship was flying toward the second consumed planet, broadcasting Devourer identification signals while secretly carrying human explosives. Admiral, Day reported, the other bioships are not attacking us. As far as they can. Tell, we are one of them. We should reach the planetary surface in 20 minutes. Meanwhile, Captain Jin and his stealth teams had infiltrated all 3 consumed planets. What they found inside the biological computers was beyond anything they had imagined. The planetary brains were vast networks of neural tissue from hundreds of different species, all connected together in a massive thinking machine. "Admiral," Jin whispered over a secure channel, "I am inside the central processing core. The amount of consciousness stored here is unimaginable. I can see memory, fragments from species that died millions of years ago." Dr. Kang was monitoring the infiltration from the Iron Typhoon. "Captain Jin, are you detecting any human neural patterns in there?" "Negative. It looks like we are the first species they have encountered that they cannot fully analyze. There are sections of the brain network that are trying to process human behavior patterns, but they keep generating error messages." Commander Hana studied the data flowing back from the infiltration teams. "Admiral, I think we have found their weakness. The Devourers are so ancient and have absorbed so many civilizations that they have become predictable themselves. They expect every species to follow the same logical patterns. But humans do not follow logical patterns," Wu realized. "Exactly. Our willingness to sacrifice ourselves for others, to choose hope over logic, to fight impossible battles, these concepts are completely alien to them. They literally cannot compute human psychology." The first major breakthrough came when Captain Sol's assault group reached the largest planet. Her spatial distortion cannons began tearing holes in the bioship defenses, creating gaps that should have been immediately sealed by reinforcements. Instead, the Devourer bioships hesitated, unable to decide how to respond to an attack that seemed designed to fail. "Firing spatial distortion warhead," Sewell reported. "Target is the central nervous cluster." The warhead punched through the planet's atmosphere and struck the massive brain structure covering the surface. Instead of a normal explosion, the spatial distortion weapon caused reality itself to twist and fold around the impact point. The biological computer network began tearing itself apart as space-time became unstable. "Direct hit," Sol's weapons officer reported. "The planetary brain is experiencing massive system failures, but the victory came at a terrible cost. The Void Render had used the last of its exotic matter reserves. Without her experimental weapons, Captain Sol's ship was defenseless against the bioships that swarmed toward her." "Admiral," Sol's voice was calm despite the desperate situation, "my ship is disabled. Recommend immediate withdrawal of assault group." "Negative," Wu replied. "We do not abandon our people." "Sir, with respect, that is exactly what you should do. Saving my ship would require resources you need for the evacuation. Let us go, Admiral. That is an order from a dying captain to her admiral." Admiral Wu felt something break inside his chest, but he knew Sewell was right. The mission came first. "Understood, Captain. It has been an honor serving with you." Captain Sol's ship disappeared in a burst of light as the bioships overwhelmed her defenses. But her sacrifice had damaged the central planetary brain enough to disrupt the entire Devourer network. At the same time, Captain Day's captured bioship reached the second consumed planet. Instead of landing normally, Day ordered his demolitions teams to detonate all their explosives at once while the ship was still in the atmosphere. "All hands, brace for impact," Day announced to his crew. "We are going to ram this planet like a meteor." The bioship, now filled with human explosives, crashed into the surface at tremendous speed. The explosion was visible from space as a new sun briefly ignited on the planet's surface. The biological computer network covering that world went completely dark. Captain Jin's stealth teams struck at the same moment, detonating their charges deep inside the third planet's brain network. The disruption caused a cascade failure that spread through the neural connections like a virus. All 3 planetary brains are down, Dr. Kang reported with amazement. The Devourer collective consciousness has been severed. But as the human fleet celebrated their impossible victory, something unexpected began to happen. The neural networks on the consumed planets did not simply shut down. They began releasing something. "Admiral," Dr. Kang called out in wonder, "I am detecting massive amounts of consciousness being released from the damaged brain networks. The absorbed memories of millions of species are breaking free from Devourer control." On the main screen, they could see streams of light rising from the consumed planets. The lights moved like living things, swirling through space in complex patterns that seemed almost like writing. Dr. Kong worked frantically to analyze the phenomenon. "Admiral, these appear to be the preserved consciousness patterns of every species the Devourers have consumed over millions of years. They are trying to communicate. The streams of light began forming shapes and symbols in space. The translation computers struggled to process the massive amount of information, but gradually patterns emerged. "Thank you," the translation system announced. "Freedom, finally free. The children of the Death World have given us peace." More messages began flowing from the released consciousness patterns. Gratitude from species that had been extinct for eons. Warnings about other devourer collectives in distant galaxies. And most surprisingly, gifts of knowledge from civilizations that wanted to help humanity in return for their freedom. "Admiral," the communications officer said with awe in his voice, "we are receiving star charts, scientific data, and technological information from dozens of different species. They are sharing everything they learned before they were consumed. But the strangest message came from a group of consciousness patterns that identified themselves as human. They were the crews of ships that had been destroyed in the battle, somehow preserved in the planetary computer networks. "Admiral Wu," the voice was unmistakably Captain Soul, "we are still here. The Devourers tried to absorb our memories, but human consciousness is too chaotic for them to process. We have been working from inside their network to help disrupt their systems." Tears ran down Wu's face as he realized what this meant. Human psychology was so unique that even death could not stop them from fighting. The released consciousness patterns began to fade as their energy dispersed into space, but their final messages were clear. The Devourer collective in this galaxy was broken. The remaining bioships, cut off from their controlling intelligence, were fleeing back to deep space where they would probably enter hibernation again. "Admiral," Prime Yule's voice came from the Villani shelter. "Our sensors show all Devourer activity has ceased. The bioships are withdrawing. You have saved us." The evacuation of the remaining Villani proceeded quickly once the Devourer threat was neutralized. The Death Fleet had lost 4 ships and over 3,000 crew members, but they had achieved the impossible. They had defeated an enemy that had conquered galaxies. As the fleet prepared to return to human space, Admiral Wu received a message from the Galactic Council. The other species had monitored the battle from long range, and news of humanity's victory was spreading throughout known space. "Admiral Wu," the message read, The Galactic Council formally recognizes humanity.